greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to the best damn movie-related show on the planet Earth, the John Campea Show, coming to you from right here in Hollywood, California. I am, of course, your host, John Campea. It's an awesome honor and privilege, as it is every day, to have you guys joining us here as we talk about all of our favorite things in the world, movies, movie news, a little bit of television here, there as well. And I, of course, am thrilled to be joined by the one, the only, the great, Mr. Robert Meyer Burnett. Robert, how you doing today, sir?
Well, John, thank you for having me. Do you know that today is December 17th?
It is.
It is the anniversary of the Wright brothers' first flight at Kill Devil Hills.
I did not know that.
They did, 1903. They made their first flight, and this is the anniversary of that. Man first took to the skies in an airplane in 1903.
It should also be pointed out that yesterday, Miss Philippines won the Miss Universe pageant, and of course, my wife is my extended family is Filipino, and that's all I'm going to hear about for the next little while. Anne's already texted and tweeted me about it about 3 or 4 times, and so there's that. So congratulations to the Miss Philippines.
Okay, can I just bring up the Seahawks gave up 148 yards yesterday to 14 penalties. They lost to San Francisco, even though the statistics say they were trounced.
Yeah, it was.
So what does that prove?
Hey, my New England Patriots lost yesterday.
You know, you got to take the good with the bad, John.
Got to take the good with the bad. Well, listen, guys, we got a bunch of things we're going to get to today from topics that you guys have submitted in. But before we get to those, we got a couple of things to get to off the top, and we're going to start with this. Rob, you know, and everybody else knows, I don't have a lot of respect for the Hollywood Foreign Press or their Golden Globes Awards. I think it's the most useless award show out there, but I will give them this.
It's free booze, though.
It is free. I'll give them 2 things, actually. Number one, they put on a great show. The Golden Globes show is a very entertaining show to watch.
Very much so.
And I'll give them that, absolutely. I enjoy watching, even though I think their awards are useless. But the second thing they usually get right is their annual version of their Lifetime Achievement Award, which is the Cecil B. DeMille Award. And they've announced who their recipient of the Cecil B. DeMille Award is this year, and that is the great actor, Jeff Bridges. Jeff Bridges is going to be honored with their Lifetime Achievement Award this year. And it's one of those things where you hear the name and you're like, well, duh, of course. I mean, this is, as much crap as I give the Golden Globes and the Hollywood Foreign Press, they do usually do a really good job with their Lifetime. And this is a great selection. I love this pick. Jeff Bridges is a treasure in this industry, and I'm really glad to see him get this.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. I was afforded the opportunity. I did this feature-length documentary on the making of Tron, and my big get was I needed to talk to Jeff Bridges. And I'm like, will he talk to me? Maybe he'll give me 10 minutes. No, I went to Santa Barbara. I sat down with him for hours.
Wow.
And he was fantastic. And
just tell him you've got weed.
No,
sit down with you as long as you want.
Yeah, well, what was really interesting about him that I didn't know is he's a world-class photographer.
Yes.
And he shoots a lot of behind-the-scenes photographs on the sets that he's on.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and there was some pictures from what he did on Tron, but I would hope like a company like Toshin, who makes these, they have the Star Wars archives coming out, big art books, that somebody would put together a really nice, thick coffee table book of all of his on-set photos over the years.
Well, if he wanted to do it, somebody would publish it.
I think so, and first of all, nicest guy in the world, and what a body of work.
Well,
I mean, he was in the original 7. Well, he was in Dino De Laurentiis' remake of King Kong in 1976
yes, he was.
with Jessica Lange, hubba hubba.
Well, and speaking of the highlights, let's take a look at why this guy is such a great. First of all, he did finally win his Academy Award for that film Crazy Heart, which was wonderful. He was nominated 7 times, 6 of them were for Best Lead Actor. Once he was nominated for Best Supporting Actor. Then if you look at the different films he's been involved with, of course, a lot of people, when they think of Jeff, the first film they're going to think of for a lot of people is The Big Lebowski, playing the dude. Then you got True Grit, I actually like True Grit more than the original. I like that True Grit movie more than the original. He was, of course, in really the film a lot of people consider kicking off the MCU Iron Man. He was the first villain.
Obadiah Stane.
The Warmonger, Hell or High Water just the other year, which was stupid good. Of course, you mentioned Tron. A lot of people forget about Starman.
Another Oscar-nominated performance.
Yes, it was. And
Jenny
then, of course,
Hayden.
Against All Odds, which, of course, gave us the great Phil Collins song.
And an awesome car chase on Sunset Boulevard.
Yes, it did. And a lot of people don't think about this film, but it is one of my favorite Jeff Bridges films. It was called Kiss Me Goodbye. Do you remember Kiss Me Goodbye?
Vaguely.
It was like early 80s.
Yeah.
It was Jeff Bridges, Sally Field and James Caan.
Oh yeah.
It's the one where Sally Field. This is a great little movie. I watched this when I was like 10 years old. This is a great little movie where Sally Field was married to the James Caan character,
right,
whose name was Jolly. And Jolly was this big, famous Broadway choreographer, but he had died 3 years earlier. It's now 3 years later. She's going to get married now to Jeff Bridges, and they're moving into her old house when Jolly's ghost appears. And only Sally Field can see her ghost, and it causes all these problems. It is a delightful little movie. But I love that one. So a lot of people might wonder why I put Kiss Me Goodbye on there.
He was in a movie with Clint Eastwood called Thunderbolt and Lightfoot, which is the first film that Michael Cimino, who later went on to win the Academy Award for The Deer Hunter, directed. It was his first feature, which I always dug that movie.
So, hey, listen, guys, what are some of your favorite Jeff Bridges moments in Jeff Bridges films? Love to hear that. Oh, and lest we forget, he also did the voice. He was the lead voice in The Last Unicorn. Let's not forget about that, ladies and gentlemen. He was the lead voice in The Last Unicorn. The Baker Brothers.
Baker Boys, yeah.
Baker Boys, the fabulous Baker Boys.
So good.
On and on you could go about this guy. Totally well-deserving. And so to the Hollywood Foreign Press and the Golden Globes, well done. That's a good selection.
Or was that Beau Bridges, his brother?
I think that both were in the Big Fabulous Baker Boys.
And Michael Douglas.
And I think was it Michelle Pfeiffer that was it?
Yes. No, you're right. It's both. Yeah, I'm thinking of the Wonder Boys.
Both of the brothers, the Beau brothers.
Both of the brothers, the Beau brothers. Yes.
All right, guys. Let's go off onto one other off the top thing here. I am lucky enough that I have now seen every comic book movie of 2018.
I've been waiting for this.
You're just short on one because you were very, very busy. You got a film you're trying to put out, so you haven't had a chance to get out to see Spider-Verse yet. Although I had a spare ticket for you, and I invited you.
I know.
But you got work to do, I understand.
I know.
So I thought, I've had a lot of people saying, John, now that you've seen all these things, what are the top 5 comic book movies of the year? So, folks, I know Kevin Feige, Jeff Johns are all sitting around watching this video right now, sweating, trying to find out how I rank the comic book films of this year. I know you're all sitting at home right now sweating to find it out. So let's go into our top 5. I'm going to give you guys now the top 5 comic book films of the year. Now, before we get to the top 5, I can give 2 honorable mentions. 2 honorable mentions that did not make it in my top 5, but I got to say, I like both of these films. So it hurt me not to put either of these films on, okay? One is Ant-Man and the Wasp, which I really enjoyed, Ant-Man and the Wasp. And the other is Venom, which I really surprisingly enjoyed quite a bit. But this was a good year for comic book films. It's a good year because, like I said, I enjoyed Venom and I really enjoyed Ant-Man and the Wasp, but neither of them could get on my list here. So with those mentioned as my honorable mentions, let's get into the top 5, and we're going to start with number 5. The number 5 best comic book movie of the year? Aquaman. Yes, I liked Aquaman more than Ant-Man and the Wasp and more than Venom. I went to see it again the other night.
Wow, how'd it hold up for a second time?
You know what? I think I enjoyed it even a little bit more the second time around.
And what about the octopus playing the drums?
I was able to just kind of blink when that happened. I just kind of forget that happened. I mean, look, still not a perfect movie. There are a few things that I think James Wan needs to sharpen his tools on a little bit, and there were a few moments I could have done without. But you know what? Overall, it was a damn fun. You know what? At the screening we were at, I forget his last name, but Yaya, the guy who plays Black Manta, they came out and introduced the film for us the other night at the screening at the.
He must have been just stoked.
He was super happy to be there.
Stoked, yeah,
and everybody loved him. Jason Momoa, I've been thrilled since day one that he was cast as Aquaman, even in Justice League. I was thrilled when James Wan got announced. They deliver. Look, this film is a win for Warner Brothers and DC. And if this is going to kind of set a starting point and a precedent for what we can expect from Shazam, Wonder Woman 84, maybe even Birds of Prey, which I'm skeptical about, there could be some good things on the horizon for Warner Brothers in the DC universe. So Aquaman, thumbs up to it, and it gets the number 5 spot for my comic book movies of 2018. So let's talk about number 4. Number 4 is a movie I swear when I saw it would have ranked much higher. But it's Deadpool 2. I love this. We're only at number 4, and we're talking about how much I love these movies.
Yeah.
Deadpool 2, you had a monumental task in front of you to try to live up to that first Deadpool movie. Is it as good as the first Deadpool? I still wrestle with that. I still wrestle a little bit whether I prefer Deadpool 1 or Deadpool 2. I think I'm leaning more towards Deadpool 1, but Deadpool 2 was a fabulous follow-up. Again, the fourth wall breaking hilarious. They upped the action. The whole Juggernaut stuff was fantastic. And the Juggernaut versus Colossus fight
Oh,
was so good. And of course, introed by Wade when he goes, CGI big guy fight, and then they go so much
and of course
fun.
you have the Nickelback produced Josh Brolin.
Yeah, the Nickelback produced Josh Brolin. I mean, who played Cable really well. I love the way Domino played in it. The whole misdirection about the use of X-Force in the movie
Right.
was awesome. I mean, you'd think when they're pumping X-Force in the marketing, and then they kill them all off so fast, you'd think we would have been disappointed. But it was so funny that they used their marketing campaign to set up a gag in the movie.
A great gag too.
A wonderful gag. Just fabulous. So Deadpool 2 is my number 4 favorite comic book movie of the year, which moves us into number 3, Black Panther. And I will go so far as to say, not only is this one of the best comic book movies of the year, it was probably the most important comic book movie of the year. I mean, because when you look beyond just the movies, what it kind of represented for finally making a strong financial case for the need for diversity in our films and all that sorts of stuff. It took us into a direction we have not had our comic book movies, especially in this new age of comic book movies, have gone before. But let's not talk about the importance of the film. Let's talk about the quality of the film. I just remember watching this thing from that first kind of battle going on when he is rescuing, well, he thinks he's rescuing his Lupita Nyong'o.
Right.
Like we're in that opening shot. That was fabulous. The whole drama of him, Michael B. Jordan, like just a fabulous villain. I think you could make an argument that maybe even Michael B. Jordan maybe could get a Best Supporting Actor nomination at the Oscars. I don't think he will. We're not seeing that play out, but I won't be surprised if he does. Terrific story. There's a little bit of wonky CGI, yes. Where there's some things that were done well but could have been done stronger, sure. But overall, one hell of a solid film. And like I said, probably the most important film as far as all the things that it achieved. Like, what were your overall thoughts about Black Panther?
Well, I really enjoyed Black Panther. I think the comic book stuff, like I thought the Killmonger taking over Wakanda was a little rushed and forced.
It was a little rushed.
And I could have watched another hour of Killmonger and T'Challa just going at it philosophically and power struggle for getting people on your side. But I mean, look, it's still a comic book movie. I love Michael B. Jordan's performance in this film. I love the entire cast. This cast, one of the strongest casts of any movie of the year, not just a comic book film, and not since Star Trek: The Motion Picture has bald women been as alluring. The Dora Milaje in this, they're the coolest. I mean, if anybody deserves a spin-off film,
it's the Dora Milaje.
Oh my God, I want to see. First of all, make some. They've made a Shiri hot toy that's coming out.
Yes,
but where's the Okoye hot toy? Come on, man. One of the greatest outfits ever. I think the potential for creating spin-off movies and world building, all of these characters are great. I'm so happy that they played a part in perhaps another movie on your list, that we did see Wakanda again. I thought that was one of the most fun things of the year, was being introduced to this world and then being able to catch up with our characters a mere few months later.
Yeah, that
was so great. I really like this movie. I caught the very end of this movie on Netflix the other day, and I love the very end. Not the credits tags, but when they go back to the beginning and they buy that building.
Oh yes,
you know, and that's where the Wakandan embassy or their outreach. That's the first place that's going to be. I love that scene. It's just a really. It's not just important.
I thought you were taking me to Disneyland.
Yeah, it was great. That's great.
All right, well that brings us into our top 2 spots. So, what's the number 2 film? I'm shocked, but it is Avengers: Infinity War, is my number 2 favorite comic book movie of the year. You know, it's funny. I put up a poll on my Twitter, just a cold poll. Just said, guys, out of the films that have come out so far, and at the time, Aquaman and Spider-Man and the Spider-Verse had not come out. So out of all the films that have come out so far this year, comic book films, what were the best comic book movies? 83%. And I've got a tiny amount of followers compared to some. I've got a big amount of followers on Twitter compared to others, but I have about 80,000 followers on Twitter. 83% said Avengers: Infinity War. 83%. What this movie... the really intriguing thing about Avengers Infinity War, it is a movie that goes beyond its own four walls. Avengers Infinity War is not just its own standalone movie. It is a build-up and a culmination, if you will, of all that has come before it in the MCU. It is, my one criticism of Infinity War has always been, it is a very, very full-packed movie, and I feel at times in the movie you can feel it, bursting at the seams a little bit. There are some points in the film that I thought it's a little over heavy, but oh my God, the way that the Russo brothers navigated their way through this film with the sheer amount of characters they had, with the sheer amount of storylines they were trying to do, and we're trying to involve the weight of it all while making it still feel very individual. It's such an achievement and an accomplishment. And it's one of those movies, not just comic book movies, that you sit there and the movie ends and you're still just sitting there. And not even just waiting for the post-credit scenes. You're just sitting there because you're just kind of marinate in the experience you just saw. And I got a huge kick out of going back to the theater over and over again, picking out the people who I know have not seen this movie yet, and then just kind of watching them. I remember Ray and I went to a screening of Infinity War, and we were sitting beside this dad and his kid, right? This dad and his kid. And the kid, I don't know, how old do you think his kid was? Like 10? Maybe like 8, something like that, this kid, right? And so Ray, who has seen the movie, right? He's like, hey, so who's your favorite? Ray's talking to this kid, right? And the kid's like, Thanos. And me and Ray are like, not for long, kid. But anyway, and then, so this kid's all excited, right? Sure enough, by the end, when everybody's dying, Ray and I look over this kid, and he's got his head buried in his dad's jacket, like he couldn't even watch anymore. But then hearing people as T'Challa dies, and you're in a theater, like, no! You hear people in the crowd, and when Peter dies, no! And it was such a great in-theater experience watching that movie.
Oh, I couldn't. I was sitting next to the great John Schnepp and Amy Dallin. We were sitting there together, and we were, all of us, as I like to say, deliriously excited to see this film.
Right.
I couldn't believe how much fun I had watching it. Like, yes, it's the culmination, but these characters and this film was so huge and the fantastical elements. Yeah, you want to watch Thor turn on a dead star? You got that in this movie. I mean, it was, you want to watch Thanos put the beat down on the Hulk? It's in this movie. It's kind of like the old Key and Peele sketch when they're talking about Liam Neeson's. The Neeson sketch.
Liam Neeson?
Yeah, when they're talking
So
about, I mean, I felt like Key and Peele watching Infinity War, and I want to do a sketch where I just talk about what happens in this movie. But when you get to the end, like, I didn't see it coming. Like, I wondered, are they going to do the whole thing with the snap? I had said on the Heroes, I'm like, if this movie ends with that snap, I'm going to be a satisfied customer. Not only did it end that way, but then they just dusted half of these beloved. And the moment where when Peter Parker's like, I don't want to go, Mr. Stark, and I shed a tear. Like, I'm like, oh, that was a gut punch, man.
Although, again, it comes back to my one, and everybody knows how much I love the MCU. My one big criticism of the MCU has always been their fake death. Nobody actually died. They always fake death. So as much as I love that scene, it was neutered a little bit for me because I knew, well, I mean, yeah, they're killing these people. But we all know they're coming back. So kind of alleviated. But you could tell there were people in those theaters who didn't know they were coming back.
Right.
With these huge emotional outpourings in theaters. It was such a great experience.
Yep.
And that leads us into, I got to tell you guys, for me, shocking. My number one comic book film of the year is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. And I am sitting here more shocked than any of the rest of you watching this video that I'm putting at my number one.
Yeah.
If you guys will remember back when in the day, number one, when they first announced this movie, I thought, well, this sounds a little desperate on Sony's part. I mean, we can't do Spider-Man live action, so let's do Spider-Man animated. And then the first trailer came, and while a lot of you guys loved and ate up that animation style, and I think you like the animation style too, it didn't work for me. I'm watching the animation style in the first trailer, and I'm like, nah. This is going to be such a throwaway film. And then the previews start to come, and then we start hearing that people are seeing the film and they're loving it and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe it's better than I thought it was going to be. Maybe it's actually really good. Okay, that's great. I was not prepared for how good, forget comic book movie, how good of a movie this is. Robert, one of the things I've been saying the last couple of days about this movie was that you can tell that when they sat down and sat at their writer's table. They went, let's not make a good animated film. And let's not set out to make a good comic book movie. Let's start with all the building blocks of a great movie, period. Great movie. What do we need? We need good narrative. We need compelling characters. We need good conflict. We need resolution. We need heart. We need emotion. We need humor. We need all. And they started from there. And I will tell you what else. I've never cared for the Miles Morales character. Just yet another derivative knockoff character. I've never hated the character.
Sure.
But oh my God, I'm a Miles Morales fan now, man. I am a fan now. The way they handled this and the way they handled the Peter character and Spider-Ham and Spider-Man Noir voiced by Nicolas Cage and all this kind of stuff. It is a beautiful, take the Spider-Man element out of it. And this is a beautiful, well done, perfectly executed motion picture that I was just giddy after it was finished. And I remember walking out of that screening I saw it at and just wanting to just immediately turn around and go back in. The movie that I probably would even have thought been on my top 5 of the year ended up being such a pleasant surprise for me. And just, it is not only, I think, the number 1 comic book movie of the year, it's got to be in my top 3 or 4 favorite movies of the year, period. It's just so good.
Well, I've been hearing that from everyone. I'm going to see the film today, finally. You know who's really loved this movie are all my writer friends. A lot of my TV writer friends.
I know why.
And, you know, I'm surprised by that because you don't usually hear them so effusive over like animated films, because a lot of animated films tend to be, you know, a little formulaic, but people are really singing the praises of this movie. A lot of my industry friends, which really surprised me, but I guess not. I mean, a great film is a great film, and it's recognized across all everyone's opinion. This is the most, I don't think I've ever heard people so excited about a movie before. And people love this movie. I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, so just to highlight once again, guys, the top 5 comic book movies of the year with all, a special recognition to Ant-Man and the Wasp and Venom, both of which really good, solid, fun comic book movies this year. I can't believe they're not in my top 5, but my top 5 are number 5, Aquaman, number 4, Deadpool 2, number 3, Black Panther, number 2, Avengers Infinity War, and my number 1 comic book movie of the year is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Miles Morales is for real, folks. Go and check out this movie if you've not done so yet, and enjoy. All right, guys. With all that out of the way, let's get on now to our main topics today. How do we select our main topics around here? Well, it's actually quite simple. You guys select our main topics by emailing me your topics and questions anytime, 24 hours a day, to john@thejohncampeashow.com. That's john@thejohncampeashow.com. Make sure you put the word topic in the subject line. And as always, guys, keep those emails to 90 words or less. With that out of the way, let's get to our first email today. And our first email today comes to us from our friend Terry Mullins, who writes, I saw the box office report from this weekend, and I was really surprised to see that Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse only made $35 million. The movie is amazing. What went wrong? I was expecting it to make a lot more. All right, thanks a lot for the email there, Terry. And just for know what we're talking about, let's take a look at the box office report from this weekend. The box office numbers have come in. Number 1, of course, was Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, knocking out Ralph Breaks the Internet, which had been in the number 1 spot for 3 weeks in a row. So we got Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse at $35.4 million. We got The Mule, the new Clint Eastwood, the new Clint Eastwood film, making surprisingly $17.2 million. That's more than I thought it was going to make. Dr. Seuss's The Grinch hanging in there, 11.5. Guys, this Grinch movie is better than you might think. It's certainly better than I thought it was going to be. Ralph Breaks the Internet, wonderful film, comes in with another $9.5 million. And Mortal Engines, a $100 million movie, made $7.5 million. Now, we'll talk more about Mortal Engines in a little while. But as far as Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, Robert, you hear $35 million. Was that a surprise to you at all?
No, because that's about what it was tracking at. I've heard it's made a little bit more than what it was tracking at. But, you know, here's the thing. People are used to seeing these big budget. I think a lot of people, especially general audiences, are like, wait a minute. We're getting these big live action Spider-Man movies. We're getting Spider-Man in Infinity War. Now we're going to watch some animated film called Into the Spider-Verse. I think the perception from the general audiences might have been that this was sort of a second-rate movie.
Well, dude, look, that was my impression at first.
And I think this movie, you're going to see word of mouth carry this film it's going to have legs. I think it's going to play all through the holiday season. I think people are going to go see it. People are going to find out that it's as wonderful as it apparently is. It's just a question of, it's an animated Spider-Man movie. People are getting a live-action Spider-Man movie. They're getting a movie that made $2 billion with Spider-Man in it this year. This is the second Spider movie. Actually, it's the third if you count Venom. And people are like, look, we got a live-action Venom movie. I think that this is new. A big-budget, widescreen, animated superhero epic has really never been done before other than, say, The Incredibles? Which wasn't based on a licensed property. It was an original Pixar property.
That's an original Pixar, yeah.
So I think I don't think this is disappointing. I think it's new, and I think it's charting new ground, and I think it's better, or it's going to be great for everyone because it proves that widescreen, big budget, animated superhero films are viable at the box office. Hopefully, it'll make a lot of money.
I think there's two things to keep in mind here when talking about whether or not this was, disappointing or not. One of the things you so accurately pointed out, this is what it tracked at. They early they were tracking 25 to 30. Then they said anywhere between 30 and 40, and then they said 30 to 35 was the final number they landed on, and it came out. It did exactly what they were expecting. And I think for all the reasons that you were pointing out, we've got tons, not only a lot of other Spider-Man, we've got live-action Spider-Man going on with the true Spider-Man, Peter Parker in the role. This is a Spider-Man, like Miles Morales has been around for about 15 years now?
Yep.
But to most people, a lot of the average movie going on has never heard of Miles Morales, things like that. So there was all that. You got to keep that in mind as well. The other thing, too, why we shouldn't have expected any more out of this is, traditionally speaking, when on the few occasions that Hollywood has tried taking a recognized comic book characters and doing them in wide release animated films, the results have never been that good. Check this out. For instance, going back, all the way back to a great superhero animated film, Batman Mask of the Phantasm, right? Opening, that was a wide release film.
Yep.
Opening, it made $1.1 million on its opening weekend, ended up with a total of $5.7 million. Just recently, they did the Teen Titans movie, right? Now, granted, that's more of a kid's movie. Be that as it may, it's comic book characters being used in an animated film. Opened at $10.4 million and didn't end up making its budget back at $51.8 million. So now we get Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Hey, it crushes all those previous numbers with $35 million. And what's it total going to be? Now, it is going to run into a problem here. And the problem that Spider-Man is going to run into is a problem we've seen coming for a very, very long time. We've got two other movies opening now this next weekend that are both also very well reviewed and people in the same demographic are going to go for, and that's Bumblebee, which, by the way, is stupid good. I mean, I'm still shocked that I liked Bumblebee, but it's really, really good. I even liked it a little bit more than Aquaman. And Aquaman, the aforementioned Aquaman, which is getting really good reviews as well. So that is going to be the problem that it has. But I do believe that you're right. Word of mouth is going to carry it. This is going to be a profitable movie.
Yep.
It's not going to be gangbusters, huge blockbuster, but it doesn't need to be. It's going to be profitable. And it's one of the best films of the year, and I just enjoyed it thoroughly. So no, I don't think any of us should be surprised, nor is it a big letdown. I think it's doing quite well for an animated superhero film. Mm-hmm. We don't count, again, The Incredibles, because like you said, that's not a comic book movie.
Right.
So it's doing pretty damn well. And let's see if it can start a new trend so maybe more of these can come. We already know Sony's already talking about doing a sequel to this thing. So, hey, let's see how this thing all turns out. All right, let's move on to our next topic.
Well, this one, Greg Voigt asks, I read an article in Variety that claims Mortal Engines will lose upwards of $100 million, which is a shame because I enjoyed it. What do you make of this figure, and how badly will it hurt the epic fantasy genre?
Well, here's the thing. We talked about Mortal Engines a little bit the other day. It's a bad movie. And it pains me to say, now, you clearly liked it, and that's great. That's the subjectivity of films. 18% of critics liked it too. Which, of course, leaves 82 that did not. And I'm one of the ones that didn't. And I'm a big Peter Jackson fan. I bought into the trailers. I thought the trailers looked good. And by the way, if you just want to go visually, it's epic. I mean, I loved the visuals in this movie. Peter Jackson and company created a world that I did buy into. Unfortunately, they told a ridiculous, disjointed story in the middle of it, in the midst of this world they created, that makes it thoroughly an unenjoyable film. But they did create a world. By the way, the production budget on this movie was $100 million. Peter Jackson needs to send out a memo to Hollywood that says, you have no excuse for needing $250 million to make your movies. If they can make Mortal Engines look the way it looked for $100 million, I am again convinced more and more there is some incompetence in Hollywood, but their spending is way out of control. But that's another point for another time. Fact of the matter is, Robert, it's not a good movie, but even I am surprised at how low this came in. And yeah, when it's all said and done, this is a movie that is going to lose this studio probably north of $100 million. And you know what? I know a lot of times these huge numbers gets thrown around, and we could be tempted as audience members to think, you know, what's $100 million? What's $100 million? I mean, who cares? That's nothing.
It's a lot of hot toys,
nothing.
John.
Oh my God. You know, even to these studios, Robert, $100 million to these studios is not nothing. You believe me, there are people who are going to be losing their jobs and belts are going to get tightened. These studios can't just swallow $100 million loss just like that. Because I know in this world, we talk about these huge numbers. We think, oh yeah, it's something. It's a lot. But I know you saw these results coming out here. What were your first reactions?
Well, first of all, this is based on a series of novels. There's 4 novels. And the premise is admittedly a tough sell. Mobile cities after an apocalyptic war that eat other cities. I mean, this is not something that's easily...
see, that synopsis sells me immediately.
See, it's but I'm thinking about how do I tell my mom to go see Mortal Engines? I'm like, how do I get the regular moviegoer? Now, there's a lot of great world building in this movie, and like you said, it's stunningly beautiful to look at. It looks great. I also think that this movie was horribly marketed.
It was.
If you look at the key art, it's a picture of a girl with a sweater over her face. And what you should have been doing was selling the world that you're immersed in and the various characters. There's lots of colorful characters in this movie. I mean, Hugo Weaving, as Mark Kermode said, he's doing peak Hugo Weaving in this movie.
I love Hugo Weaving.
I do too. And it's just a shame because, look, this is based on a previously existing IP. I would hope that it doesn't. Every time a movie like this fails, it gives people an excuse not to take chances on material people don't maybe otherwise know. And I think that you pointed out this movie did get made for $100 million. Unfortunately, it's not doing that well foreign either.
No, it's not.
Maybe if it opens in China or something, it'll do better. But look, I think a grand swing and a miss is better than a small or mediocre swing. I'd rather live in a world where a movie like this is getting made. I mean, that's not going to help the bean counters at the studios, at Universal. Like, wow, how much do we spend on this movie? But you know what? God love Peter Jackson and Christian Rivers, who directed the film, because it was, again, it shows you what they can do in New Zealand. This is all about Kiwi power and the production team that Peter Jackson assembled for Lord of the Rings and the people that are down there. If they're unleashed, they're going to have some grand home runs in addition to movies that stumble. So I'm happy this movie got made, and I think it might be rediscovered and appreciated over the years. I actually do think that.
Yeah, and again, it all comes down to execution. I mean, this is a movie that could have worked. They just needed to make it better. And so whether you're doing big budget, small budget, taking chances, taking big swings, you got to make a good movie.
Right.
Or else you're just kind of dead in the water. So let's see where they move from there. All right, let's move on now to the next email. And the next email today comes to us from one of our Patreon supporters, Ian. And thank you so much for being a Patreon supporter, Ian. What's up, John? I read that Amy Pascal said that she wants to continue working with Marvel for as long as possible. On the surface, it looks like we'll be seeing Spider-Man in the MCU for the foreseeable future. But could you possibly see this only being a PR move? I would like to think otherwise, but it could be possible. Thanks, and stay filthy. Well, thanks a lot for the email, Ian. Robert, you've heard about Amy Pascal talking about her desire to keep this thing over there at Marvel. Does this give you further confidence now that we are going to see Spider-Man in the MCU for the foreseeable future, or do you think it's just a PR move?
No, it's absolutely going to. Spider-Man is going to stay in the MCU. I've always thought he's going to stay in the MCU because what it does is it allows Sony to piggyback off the success of the MCU while not taking on all of the burden of making the films. I mean, look what Sony's done this year. They've made Venom and Into the Spider-Verse, and they had their character of Spider-Man in Infinity War, which made $2 billion. It's a very shrewd move. It's great corporate synergy. I think they figured out a great way to have their cake and eat it too.
Oh, yes.
And who wouldn't want to do this? I mean, Amy Pascal, look, she learned her lesson. She was running Sony for a long time. Now she has a production deal. She's no longer the head of Sony, but she learned what she did right and what she did wrong. And I think it's a very shrewd move to keep Spidey in the MCU and make things like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse and Venom or Craven or Morbius, the living vampire. I mean, it's
Morpheus is a different movie. That's
Morpheus is my Sandman movie. My Sandman movie.
You know what? This brings up two really big key points for me. And first of all, we should mention, understand, as Robert just pointed out, Amy Pascal is not the head of Sony anymore. She's one of their main producers. She's got a production deal with them. She's kind of their liaison between them and Marvel for the use of Spider-Man and all that kind of stuff. But hers is an important voice in this whole thing. And she's talking very positively about keeping this thing over there. So we'll find out if this 100% turns out to be absolutely rock solid true. So because there's still a possibility it's not, but all signs indicate this. But it points to two things that I've been saying for a long time, and everybody's been saying I'm crazy. Thing number one, I have been telling you guys for like a year that if you want Spider-Man to stay in the MCU, you don't have to like Venom. But you better cheer that Venom does well. You better hope Venom does well. Because there's all these people. I remember there's this ridiculous movement of people. Let's boycott Venom to make sure that Spider-Man stays in the MCU. And I'm like, you idiots. That is the opposite of what you need to happen. Because I'll tell you what, Sony is 100% locked into wanting to be a part of the superhero business. They're going to stay in the superhero business. The only question Sony has right now is, can we be successful in the superhero business without Spider-Man? Or do we 100% need to have Spider-Man in our stuff in order to be successful? And I told you guys, you better hope that Venom does well. Because if Venom does well, then that confirms for Sony, oh, look, we can make successful movies and be in the comic book superhero game, and we don't have to have Spider-Man in here in order to do it. We can have him, as you put, that we can have our cake, making our own stuff, and eat it too, have Spider-Man in the MCU, making all that delicious residual money there and all that kind of stuff. They can win. However, if Venom flops, I warned everybody, Sony is going to sit back and go, well, we never made a Spider-Man movie that made less than $700 million. Clearly, we can't make money without Spider-Man, and they would have taken him back in a heartbeat. And what happened? Venom makes way more than I thought it was going to make. Makes $850 million. We've now got...
On a much smaller spend.
On a much smaller spend. And we've got Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse that is kicking all sorts of ass for them. And now Sony's in a position where they're like, look at this. We're making great movies that people are liking. We're making money, and we didn't need to have Spider-Man to do it, so we can keep benefiting from him being in the MCU. It is a win-win-win. The other thing that this really highlights for me, this is, Robert, and we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. It is time for people to start giving Sony a little bit more credit. It is time for people to start giving Sony more credit, because for a long time, the big popular thing to say was, Sony doesn't know what they're doing. The company that gave us Spider-Man 1 and Spider-Man 2 and the first Amazing Spider-Man. Yes, they gave us Spider-Man 3, and yes, they gave us the Amazing Spider-Man 2. But they had a winning record as far as I was concerned with those ones. They knew what they were doing, so what they do? They make Venom that everybody said couldn't possibly work without Spider-Man. It worked, and worked gangbusters. Then they put out this little movie that idiots like this guy sitting right here said, this looks stupid, this Spider-Man and the Spider-Man. This looks ridiculous. And they made one of the best films of the year. Dude, it is time for people to start taking Sony a little bit more seriously, because guess what? The proof's in the pudding, and they clearly know what they're doing here.
Yep. I agree.
All right.
Our next question comes from Ronnie B. Hey, John and Rob. I've been reading reports that Apple may be buying Sony. How major of a shift would this be, and how much different do you think Sony's slate of movies will be with Apple as their owner? Thanks.
Well, okay. I don't know if you saw these stories going around, Robert. There were a bunch of stories going around that Sony was going to get bought by Apple, that Apple's going to buy Sony. And I had all these tweets from people asking me, hey, John, what do you think about these reports that, Apple's going to buy Sony? First thing we got to point out is this. There are no reports that Apple is buying Sony. It does not exist. Where all of this came from was this great little article that Variety wrote playing, future teller. What do you call those people? The fortune tellers. They're playing fortune teller. They wrote this
The
article
great
about
Criswell.
Yes.
Because the future is where the rest of us will spend the rest of our lives.
They did this article about here's some things that we are looking into the future of 2019 and things that will happen. And one of the things they wrote about, their future gazing, was Apple buying Sony. Here's what they wrote in their article, but this is all speculation for them. The article wrote, the Silicon Valley giant will finally recognize it could use some Hollywood expertise as it tries to catch up with Netflix and Amazon streaming services. Buying Sony gives Apple access to a library that includes Men in Black, Breaking Bad, Jumanji, as well as the rights to make more Spider-Man movies. That's a web Apple would be lucky to spin, or a web Apple would be lucky to spin. Also, buying a studio is basically a rounding error to a company worth $1 trillion. So let's be clear about this. This whole Apple interest in buying Sony thing and these reports, this all comes from just a speculation piece that Variety wrote. But that being said, and giving that disclaimer, this isn't a crazy idea, because we all know that Apple has been trying to get into the content. They've been trying more and more. They've been making moves to get into the content business. Like Disney, who looked at Netflix and the Netflix model, went, we got to get into this game, so they're starting Disney Plus. Apple is also seeing the same stuff, and they're like, you know what? We need to also be a media giant. Not just a technology giant. We can be a media giant because we've got the channels. We've got the platforms for distribution. We can do it all. We need to be a media giant. It is not an insane thought that they would want to then look into the possibility of purchasing a Sony. Sony, which has not been in great financial shape for the last couple of years. The one thing that works against it a little bit is that Sony, in the last couple of years, has seemed to be getting their house in order, and they are kind of waterproofing their boat a little bit. They're in a much better position now than they were. But while it was only speculation, it's not crazy, because on its surface, it would look like a move that would make sense. Robert, you hear about stuff like this. Do you think this would be a wise move for either Sony or Apple?
Here's the thing. My first job after working on Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, I worked at Warner Brothers in feature production for a couple of years. And I saw the highest levels of the studio working. It's really hard to run a major studio and to know what movies to make. And a technology giant like Apple has been great. The iTunes platform has been tremendous. But to run a studio and to know how to manage talent and put movies together is a very different animal than it is to build the platforms on which to distribute this material. Amazon has been ramping up and has been doing a good job so far, doing decent shows like Man in the High Castle and doing The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, and they are developing a pool of talent now, but it takes a while. Now, if Apple were to just jump in and buy Sony, would they retain the people? I mean, Fox, a lot of the great executives at Fox are being retained by Disney.
Yes.
Fox Searchlight, for instance, Nancy Utley is being brought over, and other executives are being brought over. But it could be a wise move, but then again, creating content is very different than distributing content. And while it might seem to be a shrewd move, as long as they have the people in place that can keep the boat moving forward, I'd say okay. But it's dicey. It's difficult. It's not something you can just, Apple's buying Sony. Great. We'll see.
You just raised a great point, which is why I do think it would be a smart move for Apple if it were to ever happen. Because number one, you're not just acquiring properties, you're acquiring a company, which means you're bringing in that expertise along. Like if this was a story about Apple, we're going to buy the rights to Breaking Bad and we're going to buy the rights to Men in Black, that would be alarming. Because, like you said, but you don't have the people who know how to do what they're doing. But if you're buying the company as a whole, and you bring in that talent that knows how to do that to now work in a synergistic kind of relationship with your platform people and your distribution, there's some pretty interesting things that could happen there. Now, a lot of people I've already been noticing, I've been hearing on Twitter and asking live in the chat board as well, is like, yeah, but if Apple buys Sony, then the Spider-Man rights revert back to Disney. That's not necessarily true.
No.
It's the same kind of scenario that we were looking at, that if Comcast had bought Fox, that the X-Men rights would have stayed with Fox. Here's the analogy, okay? let's look at me and Robert here for a second. Let's say
Hi.
Robert
How's
owns
it
a
going?
sports team. Let's say he owns the Seattle Seahawks. Robert is the owner of the Seattle Seahawks, right? Now,
They better play better than they did last weekend.
so let's say Ray Ora, who's sitting over there, is Robert's star quarterback. Ray has a contract with Robert to play for his Seattle Seahawks. It's a 5-year deal, whatever. So he's got a contract with him, right?
I paid him well, too.
And you paid him well. So now in this scenario, Robert is Sony, Ray is Spider-Man. Are you following me here? So Spider-Man has some legal obligation contracts with Sony. Sony's the owner. Now, here's the thing. If I come along and let's say I'm Apple, all right? But let's say I'm another a sports owner and I want to buy the Seattle Seahawks, all right? I can now buy the Seattle Seahawks, and now I am the owner of the Seattle Seahawks. Ray's contract does not disappear because Ray's contract is with the Seattle Seahawks. Regardless of who the owner of the Seattle Seahawks is, Ray has a contract with the corporation known as the Seattle Seahawks. And as long as the Seattle Seahawks are still intact, and as long as the Seattle Seahawks are still an existing corporation, then his contract stays valid. Had Comcast bought Fox and didn't break it apart for pieces but kept it together as its own company, the X-Men would have still stayed with Fox even though Fox had new owners. If Apple were to come in and buy Sony outright and keep Sony together and keep it as a company, then whatever deals exist between Sony and other parties are still enforceable under law. So it would all depend. Like if Apple were to buy it and pick it apart for pieces, yeah, then Spider-Man rights go back to Marvel. If Apple buys Sony and keeps it all together as an existing corporation and company, then the deal's still valid and the deal's still good and Spider-Man stays exactly where he is.
Well, I was going to say the one thing that worries me and the one thing that I've seen for almost 30 years, the motion picture business, the movie business is the one business on the planet Earth that everybody thinks they know how to do. It doesn't matter who it is. Everybody thinks they know how to make movies. Look no further than Twitter to see how everybody would make a Star Wars film. It's not easy. And it's not, most of the people that run the studios are Ivy League educated business people. And you wonder, well, look, on paper, from a corporate standpoint, having an Ivy League educated business person is probably a good person to have in charge of hundreds of millions of dollars and how that money is being spent. But is that the best education to necessarily know what stories are great? You know, everybody else, they're looking, the great studio executives of yore, Louis B. Mayer and people like that, the buck stopped with them. They worked with their gut. You know, there was not the corporate interests that we have now, where people are beholden to boards of directors and shareholders who can bitch and moan and complain if your Justice League movie doesn't make $1 billion. So it worries me when you hear stories like Apple will take over, because I'm sure there's a whole group of people in Apple that'd be like, yeah, man, put me in charge. Even though, and I would be one of them. But I would bring a little something to it. But it worries me when these kinds of corporate mergers happen, because what happens is a lot of people lose their jobs, people are on the chopping block, and everybody wants their new employees to come in and take over. So there's good points and there's bad points.
There's potential for great things, there's potential for disaster as well. But still, it's an intriguing possibility, especially with that kind of an influx of money when you got a company that's worth that much and what they could possibly experiment with and try. And Apple's never been a company that's been afraid to experiment.
No, that's true.
So, I mean, it could be good, could be bad. We'll have to wait and see. All right, let's go on now to the final email of the day. And the final email today comes to us from Ki Sion Peck, who writes, people are saying this is the year of Emily Blunt, but Hailee Steinfeld is doing pretty good this year too. In December alone, she is one of the year's most critically acclaimed films, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, and is also in what most are considering the best Transformers movie ever. All right, that's true. So the question becomes, a lot of people recently we've been talking about, is this a year of Emily Blunt? Key brings up, should we be saying it's the year of Hailee Steinfeld? Robert, whose year is it?
I think it's the year of women. Women in general. I mean, isn't it great that you've got these great female stars headlining these movies that everybody's excited about? I wouldn't pit either or. I mean, Hailee Steinfeld was in True Grit.
Yes, she was.
With Jeff Bridges.
That's where we really became familiar with her.
And I think it's what's great is to see actresses headlining movies that are making money and that we're always excited about. Emily Blunt. Who would follow up? Who would dare follow up Julie Andrews in one of the most indelible performances of all time as Mary Poppins? I don't know any. I can't imagine being an actress to have the cojones to do that.
Yeah.
And let's hear it for Emily Blunt for knocking it out of the park. I can't wait to see this movie.
Yeah, she's already getting a lot of Oscar buzz for it.
And then to have Hailee Steinfeld come in and take on a Transformers film. Well, how did that agent conversation go? Haley's agent calls him and goes, so Paramount, the Travis Knight wants you to headline Bumblebee. I'm sure she went home and said, "Oh, good for me! I'm going to be in the what, sixth, the seventh,
the next train wreck of a Transformers
movie." So again, cojones. I think that we should celebrate both of these great talents. And look, I think we should have given Emily Blunt a lot of credit for starring in All You Need Is Kill, Edge of Tomorrow, Live, Die, Repeat. I mean, she's an amazing talent who already endeared herself to me for that film. Where's that sequel? But I think it's great for all actresses everywhere that they can headline great genre movies. It's really interesting. It makes me think that we should get a lead role for another Star Wars movie that happens to be female. Oh, wait.
All right. Well, I'm going to tell you what. There is a definitive answer here. The definitive answer is Emily Blunt. I mean, this is the year. There is a definitive answer here. And first of all, let's give all credit in the world to Hailee Steinfeld, because you mentioned True Grit. Dude, the other year, did you see Edge of 17?
Oh.
How good was she in that movie?
She's great.
She is remarkable. And she also did, and by the way, girl can sing. I don't know if you saw her in her Pitch Perfect movie. She's got pipes, man. She's great. She's wonderful. I liked her very much in Bumblebee. And obviously I like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse very much. But let's be clear here. On one hand, we got Emily Blunt, who is the lead star of A Quiet Place, which I think is the best film of the year.
Right.
She is the lead star and the title character of Mary Poppins Returns. Hailee, who is great, is the voice of an animated character that's a secondary or even a third level character in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. The top two are obviously Wilson Morales and then Peter Parker, and then probably Spider-Gwen is after this. So she does the voice of Gwen Stacy in that, but she is the voice of an animated character and not even one of the leads. In Bumblebee, she's the lead human character, but the star of that film is Bumblebee. So I love Hailee Steinfeld, and she's great. But when you compare this year, 2018, and what she's done, which is great, compared to Emily Blunt leading these films, she's going to get Best Actress consideration for A Quiet Place. The big decision that the Academy is going to have to make, the acting wing of the Academy is going to have to make, is which of the films do we nominate Emily Blunt for? Do we nominate her for Best Actress for A Quiet Place, or do we nominate her for Best Actress for Mary Poppins? Probably going to end up being Mary Poppins. But yeah, man, I mean, all due respect to both of these goddesses, but it's Emily's Blunt year. This is the year of Emily Blunt, and I think that's an exclamation point is going to be put on that when Mary Poppins Returns finally does hit the theaters. All right. With all that stuff out of the way, we're running long today, man. There's a lot of good stuff to talk about. But we like to save time and take some of your live questions. So we're going to do that right now. And guys, we are way behind. So we're going to fly through a bunch of these as fast as we can. And we are going to start things off here with Patrick Conway, who writes, what Marvel or DC hero would you like to see animated? Honestly, as much as I've loved a few animated films, including Spider-Man and the Spider-Verse, I prefer my comic book movies live action. That's just me personally. Do you got one that stands out to you real quick as you'd like to see animated?
I would love to see a Moon Knight. Everyone knows I love Moon Knight. I want to see like a Moon Knight, like even a black and white animated Moon Knight film, although people probably would want it in color, but still, I think that'd be great.
Ben Rayner writes, which did you like more, Homecoming or Spider-Verse? I am a big fan of Homecoming, man. It's Spider-Verse. I know you haven't yet, but you like Homecoming too, right?
I liked Homecoming. I didn't love Homecoming.
Oh, really?
Yes, I didn't love Homecoming.
All right, let's move on here. Evil Eye writes, Sean Bean is the Undying in the game Hitman 2. But the trailer for that came out about a month ago. A mutual friend of ours, Adrian Iscaria, of course, is produced the movies, and yeah, which is a great running gag because Bean is known for dying in almost everything he's in. So for him to play a character called the Undying is kind of perfect. Jabin Carter writes, I'd love to see a disillusioned Scarlet Witch become the villain for an Avengers movie down the road. It would be a great character arc. Thoughts? Well, look, I love the idea of good guys gone bad. I like that idea a lot. That's why part of the reason why World War Hulk was so appealing to a lot of people, and why a lot of people just assume Hulk could be somebody that can give all of the Avengers a real problem. Another character who could do that, though, and you could have the actress on screen a lot more, is Scarlet Witch. She could give the Avengers a problem. I'll tell you what, I hadn't thought about it before, but I like this idea.
Well, of course, one of the great comic storylines is the House of M storyline, where Scarlet Witch... Plus, I love Elizabeth Olsen. I think she's also another great talent, and her scenes with Vision, with Paul Bettany in Infinity War were great. Look, give me a crazy redhead or a crazy superheroine that completely alters all reality. I'm in.
All right, Patrick Conway writes, how was Sony able to use Kingpin in Spider-Verse? The same way they were able to use Peter Parker. The animated world is a little bit of a different thing contractually than anything else, so that's how they were able to do that. Ben Hayusa writes, Into the Spider-Verse, great characters, great animation, great soundtrack, great movie. I love it. One of my favorite movies of 2018. Want to see it twice. I am just pissed off that I've still only seen it once. That's the thing, first world problems. That's the thing I'm most angry about right now, is that I have only seen Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse once. I need to see it again. You know what? And I'm not thrilled with I'm still not huge on the animation style, but the movie's so good and the story's so good, you see right through it and right past that, and it doesn't become an issue at all. Patrick follows up, Spider-Verse Kingpin versus MCU Kingpin, who wins?
I've heard that the Spider-Verse Kingpin is based on Bill Sienkiewicz's Kingpin from his Daredevil.
The design of him is awesome. You know what? I like the Daredevil Kingpin better, but the Kingpin in Spider-Verse probably wipes out D'Onofrio pretty quick. So I'm going to go that one. Ben Hayusa writes, where did I go here? Ben Hayusa writes, Hailee Steinfeld, 4 for 4 now in the movies she's been in that have above 90% on Rotten Tomatoes. True Grit, Edge of 17, Bumblebee, Spider-Verse. And again, this girl, I'm telling you what, I loved her in True Grit because that was one of the few movies that I like the remake even more than the original film, and she was one of the highlights of that. I think she got an Academy Award nomination for that as a kid.
Yeah, I think she did too.
And she didn't disappear. She's only gotten better. And guys, if you have not seen Edge of 17, go watch Edge of 17.
Also, she was recently on the Graham Norton Show promoting Bumblebee. I love the Graham Norton Show. If you want to watch celebrities on a talk show, the Graham Norton Show from the BBC is probably the greatest. And she was delightful. What an articulate, intelligent human being she is. I mean, she's going to have a huge career if
Nothing
she stays in
to not
movies.
be a big fan about when it comes to Hailee Steinfeld. Jared's Reviews writes, saw Aquaman and enjoyed most of it. Found it did things good, action, but also things very bad, the romance. You know, I didn't mind the romance in it. Biggest takeaway was Wilson as Orm was amazing. Patrick Wilson as Orm was great. I was really surprised. Like, there's a part in the scene where he puts on the Ocean Master mask and everything, too. I never would have thought, and you know what? I always say, you got to sometimes adapt the comic book design. That is one of the things I wish they had adapted, because they went very true to the comic book design of Ocean Master. It didn't work as well on the big screen as it did on the printed page, but you liked it.
I did. I liked it. I loved seeing that. And I love the fact that Patrick Wilson looks like classic Aquaman.
He was really good.
He looks like the classic. So they're doing a riff on the whole. I thought it was really great. Now, you know, I love when directors work with the same actors over and over again. And obviously Patrick Wilson has a long-standing relationship with James Wan. I love that. I love kind of like how Leonardo DiCaprio and Martin Scorsese were working together for a long time, like he did with De Niro. I love that.
Let's see. Dakota Barber writes, final shot of Two Towers is so chilling. What a film. Well, first of all, Two Towers, what a film. Nominated. All 3 of the Lord of the Rings films nominated for Best Picture. What was the final shot in Two Towers?
Oh, now you're asking me. The final shot in Two Towers.
I can't remember off the top of my head. I've seen the movie like 30 times. I can't remember what the final shot was.
I'm thinking about what it is, too. And having worked on it and watched that movie 100 zillion times, I don't remember.
The dragon,
oh, that's right,
Mordor.
That's right. The camera's panning up, and it's Sam and Frodo.
Okay, that is a great shot. You know, another good example of sometimes something is so good it has a negative effect. Lord of the Rings: Return of the King, so good. Record holder for most Academy. No film in history has ever gotten more Academy Award nominations than Lord of the Rings did, and of course, Lord of the Rings: Return of the King won Best Picture at the Academy Awards. But it does make us overlook the brilliance of Two Towers. Battle of Helm's Deep.
Ugh.
Who's in that one? Good God. Okay. Christopher Bickner writes, Browns win the 6th game. I called 5. Now, you know what? They might even win 7. Like, you know what? As impossible as it is to think about, right now, mathematically speaking, the Browns are still in the playoff hunt. There is still a it's completely unlikely, but there's a mathematical chance they could actually get in the playoffs. How crazy is that? Chris Warden writes, the Robin Hood producers are thanking Mortal Engines right now for taking the spot of the biggest flop of the year. Yikes, that's bad. Yeah, it looked like for a while, number one, you got to look at A Wrinkle in Time. It looked like it was probably going to be the flop of the year. Then it looked like it was a slam dunk. Robin Hood was going to be the biggest flop of the year. But you're right. The producers of Robin Hood are writing thank you letters to the folks over at Mortal Engines saying thank you for taking our spot in the history books as being the biggest flop of 2018.
Yeah, but again, I would like to point out what a great, at least if you're going to swing for the fences, Mortal Engines was a grand gesture, and I'd rather live in a world where Mortal Engines exists than one where it doesn't.
I just wished it was existed better.
I agree with that too.
That's my only wish.
I agree with that too.
Let's see. Daryl Best Wadley writes, I really hope Black Lightning is in the next crossover. I do too. And
Me too.
It sounds like they're moving more and more towards that. I got to tell you what, I was a little bit nervous about a sophomore jinx I've really enjoyed the second season of Black Lightning. Again, it was a show to me the CW is launching. I thought, why are you doing this? And I really enjoy it.
Well, it's Crisis on Infinite Earths. That means everyone's on the table.
Yep. So it's got to be coming. Daryl Best Wadley also follows up with, is Spider-Verse the best Spider-Man movie you've seen? Because now you got to get into Spider-Man 2, which for a while, I mean, Spider-Man 2 is amongst the greatest comic book movies ever made. It's still to this day, Spider-Man 2 is in my top 10 greatest all-time comic book movies. Boy, I need to ponder that.
Right.
And you know what? And I need to see it more than once.
And we haven't seen Far From Home either.
And we haven't seen Far From Home, so that's still on the table. But I got to see Spider-Man in the Spider-Verse. I'll say this. If you take Spider-Man 2 out of it, as much as I love Spider-Man 1, as much as I love Homecoming, and as much as I love The Amazing Spider-Man 1, I would say, yes, it's the best Spider-Man movie I've ever seen. Give me a little bit more time to marinate when comparing Spider-Man 2 to that, though, because that's one of the all-time greats. Der Wunderbar writes, Moby Dick, the 1956 original or the 1998 miniseries? I never saw the 98 miniseries.
I didn't either. I like I like the original film.
Although, what was the one that Ron Howard, something of the edge of the world?
Oh, yeah.
Ron Howard just did that was based on the true story,
right?
That Moby Dick is based on, and had Chris Hemsworth starring.
Why am I drawing a blank? I feel bad.
I'll tell you why I'm drawing a blank, because I saw the trailers for that, and I thought, Best Picture nominee coming up here, boys. And not one of Ron Howard's better efforts. Yeah. So definitely better than that, but I didn't see the miniseries, so I can't say that for sure. Codwo Okosa Ama writes, A Star is Born or Bohemian Rhapsody, which is better? I'm going to go Star is Born. I was very impressed with Bohemian Rhapsody, very impressed with it completely. But A Star is Born has got serious Best Picture potential. Bohemian Rhapsody didn't for me, but it's a really enjoyable, fun film.
Yeah, I mean, I think just because they both deal with the music industry, they're different kinds of movies. They're trying to do different things. Bohemian Rhapsody ultimately is a celebration of Queen's music.
Yeah, it really is.
It was not supposed to be some dark examination of Freddie Mercury's peccadillos, and a lot of people have criticized it for that. But I think ultimately, it's a crowd-pleasing movie where Star is Born is really a different kind of an examination of what it means to be an artist. I think Star is Born is better.
And another example, remakes can be very, very good.
Yes.
Let's see. Brent Strange writes, Hey, John, hope you had a good weekend. Thanks to your recommendation, I checked out The Office, and it's now my favorite show. Scott's Tots, oh my God, cracked me up. I'm telling you, one of the genius things about The Office is there are so many times watching The Office that I have to get up, plug my ears, and go, nah, because they do things that are so uncomfortable. It's genius. Never, ever in the history of television have I felt worse in a great entertained way than the episode Scott's Tots. I have never been so uncomfortable. It is one of the single greatest episodes of television ever made. Hey, Mr. Scott, what you gonna do to make our dreams come true? And he can't. And it's so uncomfortable and brilliant. Thank you for watching that, Brent. I'm glad you're on board and that you enjoy it. Spencer Main writes, worst movie you've ever seen. Well, that's really hard to say, but I will say I've always said I've got my unholy triumvirate of the three worst wide-release big Hollywood films in history. If you want to get into all the indies, I'm sure there are worse. But of the 3 big wide-release Hollywood films, there's what I call the unholy triumvirate. And it is, in no particular order, these are the worst big Hollywood films ever. The Highlander 2, The Quickening, which is crazy because
Which version?
The first Highlander is in my all-time top 10 favorite movies of all time. Catwoman with Halle Berry, and Battlefield Earth with John Travolta. These to me are the 3 worst wide-release Hollywood big budget films I've ever seen in my life. So it's in
those are very respectable. You know what? I can't answer that question, but I will tell you the one and the only movie that I walked out of. The pseudo sequel to the Rocky Horror Picture Show, Shock Treatment.
I don't even remember that.
It was
that a wide release?
No one should remember it. It wasn't that much of a wide release. It's a cult movie now. I never even got to the end of it, so it's probably not right for me to say this. I wanted to put a gun in my mouth and pull the trigger. I hated that movie so much, and I never have walked out of a movie. I walked out of that film.
I've walked out of 3 films in my life. One was Movie 43. Which was so you could write songs about how bad that was. One was Dark Water with Jennifer.
Jennifer Connelly.
Jennifer Connelly. Thank you, Ray.
Nakata.
That I thought the movie looked great. I was in there for about 45 minutes and I just finally had to bail. And the other one was the Johnny Knoxville film, The Ringer, which I understood what they were going for was to celebrate and uplift special needs people. That's what they were going for. But I'm watching it, I'm like, I know what you're going for, and I applaud you for it, but it just feels to me like you're just making fun of people in that situation, and I'm very uncomfortable watching it, so I had to get up and walk out. So those, I think, like the only 3 movies I've ever walked out of. Okay, going to really start flying through a bunch of these here. Let's see. Brent Strange writes, saw Bohemian Rhapsody this weekend and loved it. Yeah, I remember watching it for the first time, not reading some not very good reviews, and I came out going, what the hell were these guys talking? This is fun. I like Bohemian Rhapsody a lot, man. Carmen W. writes, John, we abbreviate because Super Chat has character limit. I keep asking you guys, like people say, hey, John, what do you think about QMWTLLL? And how do you think it compares to M54W? And I'm like, guys, I'm not going to sit here and try to figure out what you mean by your abbreviations. Please try. I understand that, but just figure out a way to phrase your thing then a little bit differently to the point that it's easier to read and understand. Imad writes, why did Thanos not kill any of the Avengers in Infinity War? They're clearly a potential threat to his plans. I think a part of that was always to him. He sees himself as a hero.
Right.
He does not see himself as cruel. He does not see himself as spiteful or vengeful or whatever. He only kills because he needs to kill, as with most villains kind of see themselves.
Look, I agree with you, and I think he respects the Avengers. He knows who Tony Stark is. I mean, he understands what look. The guy's been fighting whole planets of soldiers. You know, he's doing what he thinks is right, and I don't think even though it sounds weird, he's not a murderer per se, even though he will wipe out half of it. That's nature taking its course to him.
To him, yeah.
To him.
He's very clearly evil, but he don't see himself as that. So, which is part of the thing that makes him a fascinating character. Yeah. Prolapse writes, you got to check out the series Fargo on FX. One of the best written shows I've ever seen. I got so many friends that tell me to watch Fargo. You watch Fargo?
Yeah, it's great.
Is it?
Yeah, it's great.
I'm going to need a show or two to watch when I'm off in Canada.
And, Legion, the same creative team, makes Hawley makes Legion as well, which is a great series.
I like the first Legion. Didn't like season 2. Oh. I gave up on it in season 2, but I love the first season. But anyway, let's see, where are we at here? James Bonner writes, Thor is one of my favorite MCU characters, yet I never cared for the character in the comics. Is that strange? I don't think, look, I just have the same experience. I never cared for Miles Morales in the comics. Loved him in this thing.
Yeah.
Look, sometimes all it takes is a new iteration, a fresh look at a character to maybe make you see things in a character you didn't see before. I think that's totally normal. You ever have a character you never cared much about in the comics, but you love them in the movies?
I don't know.
But Thanos is another one for me. I never cared about Thanos.
Yeah, Thanos is kind of... go back and read the Walt Simonson Thors, because they're so much damn fun. That's what I would suggest.
Jack121 writes, do you think do you think the reception of Into the Spider-Verse will have any effect on how they handle MCU Spider-Man in the future? No more Iron Spider. No, I don't think it's going to affect them anyway. I don't think if Spider-Man of the Spider-Verse was brutally awful, it would affect anything. I don't think if it's magnificently brilliant, it's going to affect anything. They're going to make what they're making, and they're going to kind of stick to their game plan. So I don't think anything's going to change.
And look, remember, the Iron Spider in the MCU was because they went into space. Yeah. You know, Tony Stark was making sure he didn't die of asphyxiation in low Earth orbit.
Ben Davis writes, "Hey, John, I saw Roma last night and wasn't a big fan. Found it to be very long and boring. Look, there are people, Robert, I've been talking about this the other day, that are not just calling Roma one of the best films of the year. There are a lot of people out there saying, this is one of the best films I've ever seen in my life. So I finally watched it. I was bored to tears. Much like Mother, it was great art. It is great art. The way Alfonso kind of puts this film together and makes it what it is, much like Mother was great art, but I couldn't stand Mother. And even though I acknowledge as a piece of art, it's beautifully put together. And Roma, look, every great film in history has people who don't like it. Hence the subjectivity of film, but we'll get into that again another time.
No.
But you know, I watched it and I was like, I want to be able to like this. I can see how it took the hand of a master to make it, but I could just turn this off right now and go eat a bowl of chips and be equally as enjoying my time. And I just didn't love Roma either.
Look, I think no one is obligated to love what everybody else loves. One of my favorite films, what I think is one of the greatest fantasy films ever made, is Wim Wenders' Wings of Desire. And that's a film most people, when I went and did I wrote a paper on it in college, I went and saw it again. Half the theater walked out, and it actually made me want to cry. I was so depressed watching these people leave this theater. I want to grab them and throttle them and say, do you know what you're missing? This is great art. But it wasn't for everyone.
Dervunderbar writes, not the bees. I can't remember what that's from.
Is that from The Wicker Man?
Oh, I mean,
Nicolas
the
Cage,
bee scene in The Wicker Man. Yeah.
Neil LaBute's remake of The Wicker Man. I think that's what you mean by Nicolas Cage.
A lot of people think that should be in the Unholy Triumvirate as well.
Oh my God, the original Wicker Man is so good. If you've never seen the original Wicker Man back from the early '70s with Christopher Lee as Lord Summerisle, do yourself a favor and watch. It's great.
Okay, Spider-Man opened to $35.4 million on December 14th. Sing was December 12th with $634 million final. Spidey, a weekend earlier, $40 million before Sing's comparable release date, and the schools aren't even out yet. Yeah, but Sebastian, that's trying to compare apples to spaceships. If you're thinking like if you're the only thing, there are so many other different variables. The lesson here is not open your film on the 21st.
Right.
That's not the takeaway here. There are so many. Sing is such a ridiculously different film from Spider-Man and the Spider-Verse. We, like both Robert and I already went into all the things that were stacked against it.
Right.
No superhero movie in animated form has ever opened to more than $10 million. The Spider-Man, we got other live action things of them. It's all those things. I don't think the release date was the issue here. Emond writes, to clarify, Thanos not killing living Avengers. Oh, no, we understood. What's that, Ray? Yeah, the ones that are still alive. No, I got what you're saying.
Yeah.
I just think that's just not how he rolls. He sees himself as a good guy. So why would he do that?
He defeats entire armies.
Yeah.
What does he care about a couple of people?
And by the way, once the snap is done, he doesn't see anybody as a threat.
Nope, he's won.
Done.
He's done.
He's won. Tout fini, Let's see. Murray Reich writes, what has the better chance of happening, the Flash movie or the Browns' 1% chance of the playoffs? At this point, I'll go the 1% chance of the Browns making play. That slim mathematical possibility that the Browns can still get. I just
again don't we all want to live in a world where the Browns are in the playoffs?
That is like Thanos' post-snap world.
Yeah, I mean that's
like before. The only way that happens is if Thanos snaps and half the NFL teams disappear, and even then the Browns probably don't make the playoffs. And yet that's probably I still believe there's a chance this Flash movie happens, but I am day by day becoming more and more convinced it's never going to happen. And I hope it does because I like Ezra Miller as a Flash. We'll see what happens. All right, guys, just 3 more, and then we got a call today. We've already gone quite overtime here today. I'm Upset writes, where's War Machine and Rocket in the Endgame trailer? You don't have time to show everybody. I mean, I'm sure there's many people in this movie that they don't show in the Endgame trailer, and I'm sure they'll get seen in future trailers, but you can't just make your trailer of let's just stuff all the characters in it. So don't worry about. We know they're there.
Besides,
so
Rocket is now on Earth. He's become the cause. Maybe. He's become the cause celeb though of he's in Wakanda. You know,
the end of the movie,
at the end of the movie.
he could have left as soon as that.
Well, yeah,
battle
but
was done.
he left to go to New York to be on the talk show circuit. He's on Letterman. I mean, if any place would have loved Rocket Raccoon, it's Earth. At the end of Infinity War, Earth needs a pickup. Rocket Raccoon is just the person or the creature.
Okay, hold on a
Oh,
second.
I love this question.
Took a big jump here. Okay, so where are we at? D-Days? Yes. D-Day writes, thoughts on Rosemary's Baby, one of my all-time favorite horror films, and I don't think it's talked about enough.
I love Rosemary's Baby. It's not only one of my favorite horror movies, it's one of my favorite films of all time. I'll tell you a funny story. It was playing at a theater here in LA about 15 years ago on the weekends, and I went and saw it every weekend for a month and took a friend of mine, and he came with me, Mark Altman, who I made Free Enterprise with. He'd never seen it before. Rosemary's Baby is incredible. Criterion put out a great Blu-ray. I love it, love it, love it.
It is also one of the most influential horror movies ever made. Like, you can just see Rosemary's Baby's DNA and fingerprints all over, like, all horror that's coming
so many
after
things.
it. Yeah.
And the performances, John Cassavetes, Mia Farrow, Ruth Gordon. Oh, so good.
Henry Stevens writes, hey, John from the UK. I saw Aquaman with my girlfriend on Sunday. Both loved it. Fun, old-school fantasy adventure vibe. Hope Warner Brothers or WDC or Warner's DC Universe goes in this direction. I think they've sent us a very clear message with Aquaman, with the Shazam trailer, that this is a new course that Walter Hamada is setting for them. And so far, we'll have to see long-term if it works, but so far, seems to be working out. Let's see. Rafael Estrada writes, the world's too big, Mom. Then make it small. Just focus on my voice. Pretend it's an island out there in the ocean. Can you see it? One of the great lines from Man of Steel. One of the great scenes. I loved Ma Kent in that. I loved Pa Kent in it. I loved Henry Cavill as Superman. That was a great moment.
One of my favorite moments in any superhero film is Kal-El Clark floating in the ocean with the whale.
Yeah.
It's so great.
Let's see. Ben Davis writes, Aquaman was awesome. So much fun. Thank you, Mr. Wan. Thank you, James Wan. Indeed. I had such a good time watching that. I'm going to watch it a few more times. Devernabar writes, Ray Harryhausen is the king of stop motion animation.
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly.
I mean, look, stop motion animation today has come a long way, but it's all built on the work that was done previously. And
Willis O'Brien, and then who did The Lost World and the original King Kong, and then Harryhausen with the Sinbad movies, Jason the Argonauts. When I was a kid, the skeletons fighting, it's so good.
I still today, you watch it and think, how the hell did they do that back then?
Oh, man. And then, of course, the last great Harryhausen movie was Clash of the Titans in 1981, probably. I don't know if it was a great movie, but it was great stop motion animation.
I'm Upset writes, more likely a Snoop Dogg Jay-Z or a Snoop Dogg Jay-Z or P. Diddy biopic. If I'm not mistaken, I think a Snoop Dogg one might actually be in the works.
I think you might be right.
I thought I heard that. So on that basis, but even if I hadn't heard that, I think a Snoop Dogg one is definitely more.
Although, it's interesting. Diddy to me is an interesting character because if I remember correctly, he produced his first record when he was 14. So to me, he's always been a really interesting figure because as an entrepreneur and as a producer, he began very young, kind of a self-made man. And those are always kind of the great stories.
Alejandro writes, why were you not in YouTube Rewind? I saw Roma and Aquaman. I'm not even quite sure I know what YouTube Rewind is. So, I think it's not like a year in review. If it is, I'm nobody, so that's why I'm not in it. If that's the case, but I'm not even 100% sure I know what that is. Jack Leo writes, quite a year for Jake Johnson. Yes, it was. He was my favorite part of both Tag and Spider-Verse. Excited to see more from him in the future. I fell in love with this guy on New Girl. Right. I just love his character on New Girl. And, of course, he was in the Jurassic World, whatever. I've been iffy on whether or not he can make the transition because he was also in The Mummy with Tom Cruise. Yep. That was a little iffy. But I loved him in Tag. First of all, that was one of my favorite comedies of the year. And his job as voicing Peter Parker is great. Wait till you hear him doing it.
I can't wait.
He's wonderful. Just a couple more because I'm just going through quick here. Sebastian writes, Movie Pass is a money grab with shady pay upfront promo. Yeah, so the new thing, Movie Pass is still trying to desperately hang on to life here. Now they've changed their thing again. Like, sometimes people say they've changed like a dozen times, but they're just being facetious and being... Movie Pass has literally completely changed what they are like a dozen times in the span of a year. Now it's a pay up front for a 3 months, 6 months, a year, trying to do all this. Still, you never know what movie you can see. But yeah, they're still just desperately
I got a
drafting for
year.
life.
I got a year movie pass for Christmas last year, and
Right.
what they have, they're a despicable company. I appreciate what they tried to do, but their business model was untenable when it started. So screw movie pass. Seriously, screw you.
Tristan Larson writes, The Favorite is fantastic. It is, and you're going to see a lot of Oscar nominations for it as well. And this will be the final one of the day from Der Wunderbar. Been binging on Transformers Prime again. Love that show. I never got into Transformers Prime. You like it? Yeah. Ray says it's good. I've had a number of people tell me it's good. I just never really got into it myself.
Again, it's just another show that has sort of passed me by because I'm freaking old. But yeah, I do. But I've heard it's great too. I've had friends that have written for the show, so I hear it's great. They think it's great.
All right, guys, that will do it for this elongated version of the John Campea Show. Went a little bit long today, but whatever. We had a lot of good stuff to talk about, and I'm glad you guys came along for the ride with us. Listen, guys, don't forget, if you enjoy these videos, click that thumbs up button there. That helps the show a lot. And also, make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel. Just click on that subscribe button and the notification bell as well. I want to thank, of course, Mr. Robert Meyer Burnett. Robert, where can people find you online?
Well, you can find me at Burnett RM on Twitter. Find me at RM Burnett on Instagram, or you can find me on my YouTube channel, The Burnett Work. I did my first live chats this week, and they went over very well. Or also, you can hear me on the Inglorious Trexperts podcast. We talk about the animated series this week, and next week we have a series of 3 shows that over the span of 6 hours that count down the 50 greatest Star Trek episodes ever up to the new year. Check it out.
And oh, by the way, guys, a lot of guys who constantly ask me, where can I get some of the John Campea merch? You can just go to, I'll put the link in the description, but it's just at cafepress.com/The John Campea Show. That's cafepress.com/The John Campea Show. A whole bunch of merchandise there for you guys. And by the way, for the rest of you guys who sent in super chats that we didn't have time to get to, don't you worry. I'm gathering up these questions we didn't get to, and they will be in an upcoming companion video. Keep your eyes open for that. If you sent one in, it's going to get answered in a video. Just keep your eyes open for that. That'll do it for me for now, guys. Thanks so much for being here. My name's John Campea, and until the next video, bye-bye.